Hello, I'm John Breckenfeld, and thank you for joining my presentation today. And here's I, I work at Hufs in Seoul, by the way, Hanguk University of Foreign Studies. My presentation title is here, Money Drives Modern Life, so why not utilize economics-driven content? So I'm gonna introduce the why, the what, and the how regarding using economics-driven content with my students. So there will be time at the end for discussion. Why do I use money-driven or economics-driven content? And so I think this could be the most relatable topic that I can introduce to my students. I work with college students, even down to elementary level. Yeah, money is an easy topic for everyone to grasp and think about. There's a lot of huge variety of what we can do regarding activities. So the rationality and revolutionary, I'll explain those two. Rationality, I often find, like Chidi, existential dread or my emotional response to certain content can interfere with my ability to communicate with students, affect my communication for sure. And so there is less emotionality when I use the lens of economics for certain issues. And so, for example, the situation now with Ukraine and the Russia invasion of Ukraine, it's I feel emotionally triggered, and unfortunately, yeah, it's not always easy for me to use this type of content with students. However, through economics focused stories or media, the emotional factor it changes for me. And I guess I've been challenged, honestly, a few hours ago, especially, I don't know if you got to see Stacey Martin's presentation, and it was quite vulnerable. She was really, it was inspiring the way she, what she shared with us. And so I think I'm actually feeling challenged to try to maybe embrace content that makes me more emotional and try to figure out how to do that. You know, it's a work in progress. Anyways, with economics content that's helpful in one way, it can be revolutionary. So the revolutionary part, I'm going to go to a little bit of theoretical influences. This would be connected to our conference theme, Teaching for a Better World. And Freire and Krashen are my main influences. So you may know this incredible work by Paulo Freire, and I'm just focusing on problem posing education out of this book. So bear with me, you'll get about 90 seconds of Freire quotes from the book. Let's take a look here. In problem posing education, people develop their powers to perceive critically the way they exist in the world with which and in which they find themselves. They come to see the world not as static reality, but as a reality in process, in transformation. Problem-posing education affirms men and women as beings in the process of becoming, as unfinished, uncompleted beings in and with a likewise unfinished reality. The banking method emphasizes permanence and becomes reactionary. Problem-posing education, which accepts neither a well-behaved present or a predetermined future, roots itself in the dynamic present and becomes revolutionary. Problem-posing education is revolutionary futurity. Students, as they are increasingly posed with problems relating to themselves in the world and with the world, will feel increasingly challenged and obliged to respond to that challenge. So, Chidi, it's going to be okay. I think we all experience existential dread, right? And so the hope in this theory is the future, right? We will be challenged to respond to the problems of the world, and students the problems that they face as well. And so my challenges with problem posing education is considering output versus input. And the content that I'm going to be describing to you that I use, which I will mostly discuss today, it's input focused. So in that case, you know, I don't get the student output. I don't hear from them their reaction to the content, right? It's that's something that's missing. And there are other ways I can use economics content where students do more language production. So I'll say a few examples later. And I'll really explain the input part. I'll spend most of my time discussing that. So Krashen focuses on input. The comprehension hypothesis, it says you're looking for the Goldilocks level. Content can't be too difficult or too easy. It's got to be just right. It should be just difficult enough, like the ZPD, right? The zone of proximal development. And Krashen focuses more on written text reading, student reading text level, the difficulty level, and also on hearing text read to students. So the compelling input hypothesis, that theory says the right type of content, if students are interested enough, the motivation factor takes care of itself. It makes it so much easier for everyone, for the educator and for the student to use the content and benefit from the content. And so in my case, yeah, I'll explain how the input happens. And hopefully, yeah, I'm meeting these goals of Krashen, that it is not too difficult, it's not too easy, and it is, hopefully it's quite interesting for students as well. So what specific content has been most effective for me? Before I share details later, let me throw out a couple discussion questions we could use. We'll see how much time we have and such. So definitely a Q&A. Just let me know whatever questions you have. You can type your questions into our chat at any time or write them down and then ask me later. So why would you use yourself? I'm curious as well. I'd like to hear back from you, hear your ideas and your input. So why would you use content? What's your motivation? What specific type of content have you used? What has been most effective? And how have you incorporated economics or money-driven content? That'll happen later at the end of this presentation. So for me, what has been most effective is podcasts. And I have used NPR. So I think I said I joined TESOL 15 years ago. My first presentation was about using NPR podcasts. So over 7 years, that has really developed. Now I focus on the right side, the indicator from Planet Money. So these podcasts are 10 minutes or 9 to 10 minutes. I work with intermediate level students. And so let's go back to Krashen here. 10 minutes is quite long. It's advanced level. And so if they hear it one time, it's too difficult. It's not very effective. So I scaffold the content and I give them 3 weeks to work with one podcast. And I recommend to them, I'll show you these details a little bit later too, about the procedure. I recommend to them that what you should do is you should just push play and read the transcript, listen to the content once a day. That can take you 10 or 15 minutes. And that's how you should use the content, interact with it. And that will prepare you for the exam as well. Because I create the midterm exam based on the content from the single podcast and the transcript. So let's continue, see some of these details. So NPR, the indicator, Planet Money, I used those before, but those are longer. Those are 20 to 23 or 4 minutes, which is, yeah, I like the 10-minute option better. So here's an idea I just put here at the end, which I'm considering to use for student presentations. And this one I heard about this from a colleague a few years ago at TESOL, something similar, where students are, it's like a role play. They work at Seoul City Hall. They work in some department. They choose the department. They have a budget. How are they going to use the budget, right? They're creating a budget proposal, essentially. So that's one idea I may use later this semester. Self-created prompts. These would be a variety of different warm-up activities. So for example, you won a contest, you get $10,000 and you have 1 week to spend the money. What are you going to do? That's like a simple warm-up prompt I've used with students, like here and there. Things like that. Getting them to think about their priorities and how their priorities and their values shapes their connection to money. I'm curious to have students do that reflection. So problem posing education. For me, economics, the gist of it, the advantages of it, it's about cause and effect, right? And I will show you specifically the topics, which, the story topics, what students were listening to back in April. So this is a very useful way to make connections with the content, I think. And it does pose problems as well. A and B are happening, C is the result, right? So what needs to change to produce a different result? And so I think actually, because this is input focused, again, a lot of this is implicit. And so moving forward for me, I want to make it more explicit and directly ask the students, what are the problems you're hearing about, right? What are the ingredients to this formula or this recipe, and what's the final result, and what could be a different outcome, right? I think I really need to be a little more direct and more explicit in the future. Just something I'm noticing, during this semester, really in real time. So indicators of the week, this is another example of every Friday, this show, the hosts, it will be 2 or 3 hosts, they use data. So they use some kind of statistic, some percentage, some number, economic data, and then each host will introduce an issue, a current issue, based on a specific data point. Something else about this, another advantage, I think, about this, these materials, the hosts do a great job of presenting the stories without adding their own value judgment. And it's really, I think it's very like neutral kind of news media. They're telling us the story, they're interviewing various experts, they usually say. And so the listener decides how we feel about the story. They don't tell us how to feel, right? So it's up to the students, it's up to the audience to make your own judgment, your own value judgment. So these are the topics that students used, right? So I've got 4 classes this semester. And so class 1 focused on the economic costs of war to Russia. So essentially sanctions. Forging new links in a supply chain. This is a really interesting story about the pandemic. You probably heard supply chain disruptions and what are ways that countries and economies can create self-sustainable supply chains, try to do things a little more domestically. What are the pros and cons to that approach? All eyes on OPEC. So talking about the oil economy, global oil economy, history of the oil economy, and the current situation in connection to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Will China come to Russia's rescue? So Korea has very powerful neighbors and allies nearby. And so this story is about, what is China's response to this situation? All right, so how have I incorporated the content? again, doing various warm-up small group discussions. Could be 5 or 10 minutes, just little standalone things that it's fun to get creative with that kind of thing. And I think students, that's the relatability factor. Students can connect with money very easily. So the scaffolding, the 10-minute podcast, these topics right here, 10 minutes each. So if students listen once, it's too long, it's too difficult for them, not very useful. So that's why I include a homework assignment. They have a 2-week period to complete the homework. And actually it starts like week 1 is just the podcast. Here it is. I'll share more details with you a week later, right? So they have several days, several opportunities to get familiar with the content. And yeah, ideally they may listen to it 10 or 20 times. And then that's when the content becomes more effective for them. Then they show their understanding of the content through the midterm exam. And so it was I do teach listening and speaking focus spring semester. So speaking, I tied a little bit of the content questions that I created around the same podcast content, but it was more of a listening exam, which was just a paper exam that they're in the classroom, paper at their desks and answering questions. Excuse me. So presentations, this would be coming in a few weeks, second half of the semester. And so I mentioned a topic idea before, a city hall role play, city hall workers, right? They work for the government, they have a budget. What are they going to do with the budget? What is their budget proposal? And another example for presentations, I often use social or CSR, corporate social responsibility. So students select companies or corporations that they know that and who are being socially responsible and give a presentation on these, on a few of those examples. Excuse me. So here are the questions one more time. I will copy and paste these and put them into our Zoom chat. And then let me just show you a couple other Google Docs, just so you see a few examples of what the students actually see. I'll go to those right now. So this was the homework document. I introduced the assignment, posted the assignment, and then they have a 2-week period to listen to the podcast and read the transcript. So I definitely make sure this is key. There's got to be a transcript too. If they're only listening for 10 minutes, like that's very unrealistic. They need the transcript to read along with. And then ideally, again, that's where the crash in input hypothesis comes into play. They're listening to very good quality speaking samples, reading the transcript at the same time. And so ideally their listening fluency and reading fluency can benefit. So they could listen to it 20 times, perhaps. It's up to them to decide how much the frequency they're going to be listening. I post the actual assignment. So I use Google Forms and then here's the deadline. So it's a 2-week process for the homework. The exam happens about a week later, the midterm exam. And so how well how often the frequency, like how much they listen should impact their ability to do well on the exam. And I emphasize that from the beginning. And the exam, here's a copy as well, because it's a 40-minute period. So I don't prefer this form of assessment. I would, in the future, I'm interested in developing this, just to be honest, because it's multiple choice, So if they listen very well, and so I can kind of rationalize this way. If they do put in the time, and I really emphasize and I let them know, take advantage of these 2 weeks working on the homework, and then the exam, if you've prepared enough, it should not be too hard to get 100%, right? Because if they miss 4 questions and they get an 80 on the exam, that's bad news for their grade, right? So it is high stakes, and so I rationalize the risk because I give them plenty of time to prepare, So then, yeah, I do also, just the procedure, how this works. Do I explain this here? Okay, yeah, I do. So they're in the classroom, I pass out the papers, and this says 5 minutes. I actually made it 10 minutes. I give them the exam papers so they can read all the questions and the answers. Then we listen one more time. We listen to the podcast in the classroom together. And I put the transcript up on the screen. I don't print it out for them. They can't read it while they're taking the exam, like on paper. They can read it once on the screen, and then they have about 30 or 40 more minutes to complete the exam. That's how the midterm exam took place. So that's I can come back to these documents again if you want to see, if you have another question about them. Let me just post these right here into our Zoom chat. Hello, Greg and Reese and James. Great to see all of you. And so this part of the presentation, if you just got here, we're moving on to discussion. That's kind of hard to read, isn't it? Let me post these questions separately. All right. First of all, anyone, if you're interested yourself, or if you're interested in asking me to clarify anything about the theory, all right, the theory I'm considering, my motivation for using economics-driven content. So please ask me if you have any questions, or please, I'm very curious to hear from all of you as well. What specific examples have you used? And then how do you deliver the content? So first of all, any questions for me? Chris, yeah? Oh, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I got it. Okay. When you talked about, like, you gave them 2 weeks to, kind of listen to the podcast, and you said sort of, here it is. I'm just wondering, exactly how did you kind of cue them, train them, emphasize them? Because it sounds like you were sort of expecting like repeated listenings,
Okay. Yeah, good question.
Go for it, or like, no, this is the guidelines I give you.
Very good question. That's important for me to clarify. So I split the transcript into 4 parts. So there's kind of chunks that they can be listening to or focusing on. And then I also, let me do a screen share to show you what I'm saying, what I'm describing. Here is the homework document. All right, so what they do, these details, I don't know if that'll make sense at the moment. Let me go down on the documents. So I split it up into 4 parts: intro, part 1, 2, and 3. And then I identify keyword phrases from the transcript. So I say, focus on these phrases while you listen, right? This is for the intro, the first 2 minutes. Then focus on these phrases and on throughout the transcript. So that's their guide. I select what I feel, what are the most important, what are the key phrases here from this story. And this is what I use. I use these phrases as well when I create the exam questions too. And the homework assignment, what they eventually complete, this is, so most of it is quite simple. It's actually just, they have the transcript available. So all the answers are right there. It's, let me see if I explain this. These are, the directions. I just copy and paste directly from the transcript. So it's really just a more of like giving a little bit of effort. It's not like they're not typing any answers. Just the final part here, this part, some questions I do paraphrase the content a little bit, and then they need to analyze it more carefully and think about, the questions and the answer choices, right? So it's, anyway, it should not be too difficult. The scores are quite high. It is a Google form, so there are points to it, and students typically score 94, 97, or 100. It's not hard to score high on the homework assignment. So good question about that. And anybody else? Please, I welcome any questions that you have.
I had a quick
Chris,
question.
yes.
So for the homework, they can listen multiple times to the podcast. In the midterm exam, is it the same podcast or a different podcast?
Oh yeah,
it's the same one, but they only get to listen once.
Right. When we're in the classroom taking the exam, I pass out the exam papers, so they have 10 minutes to read over all the questions and answers, and then they still have the paper. So when I push play, then I see them taking notes and marking.
Notes.
Right.
Yeah.
So I really can tell, like, unfortunately, a few students did bomb the midterm. Like a couple students got 7 wrong. They got 65 points out of 100. That's really going to hurt their grade. And so I assume they probably did not prepare very well. That's my kind of safe assumption. But the scores in general, I didn't calculate the average just by memory. It's over 90%. They scored. Most of them got 100, 95, or 90.
That's great.
Yeah, good question. And any other questions?
What was the podcast that you used?
Oh, so I'll go back to my slideshow for that one. It's through NPR, National Public Radio, and I just do one channel, which is called The Indicator. It's The Indicator by Planet Money. Planet Money is like the bigger department, and The Indicator, these are 10-minute podcasts. So here's some logo images. I did use Planet Money once upon a time. Those are longer. Those are 20 to 25 minutes. And so that's too much. 10 minutes is better. 10 minutes is, I think, more realistic. And so I explained, I don't know if you're here for this part, but 10 minutes, if they listen once, that's not realistic as well. It's too long. It's too difficult. So here is my procedure. Students hear about the assignment. The assignment is posted. They have 2 weeks to listen to the podcast, read the transcript. And what I recommend to them to do is, I say once a day is what I recommend. You don't need to take an hour. If you push play, you can listen for 10 minutes, maybe 15 as you're reading. And if you do it once a day, you'll be all set. So I just use, I only use The Indicator by Planet Money, or NPR, The Indicator, and it is the same podcast that they're listening to for up to 3 weeks. The same, on the exam, it's the same podcast they've had all along. And so anyone else, any other clarifications I could make for you?
Just a question, John. For the midterms, you said that you have them, you let them listen to it and you put it up on the screen, right? The transcript. Mm-hmm. And then the questions you give them, what type of questions? I don't know if you explained that.
Yeah. So I break it up. I create the questions into categories based on academic skills that are in our textbook. So we have to use a textbook. And let me show you. So the textbook is also, it's listening and speaking focused for the spring semester. Fall semester, we do reading and writing focus. So here are the categories. Listening for similarities. So this is just like the connection of ideas. And there are similarity keywords, just usually also, like, or as, and to, these kinds of words. Listening for differences, so some sort of contrast. 5 questions per topic category. Listening for details, this one has 6 questions, true, false, or not given. And then listening for main ideas, order of events. And so these ones, something else maybe I didn't say, these are all paraphrased. The homework, most of it is directly copied and pasted straight from the transcript. But these, I paraphrase everything. I paraphrase the question and the 3 answer choices. Typically, it's ABC. They have three choices to consider. So I do that as well. So just because I think it might be too easy. It'd be too easy if everything was straight from the transcript for the exam. So I do the easier version for the homework, which is kind of lower stakes and a lower portion of the whole grade of the score.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, good question. Oh, did I? Yeah, I think I showed you the last one. The 4th category is like listening for the sequence. And so actually that one I just do like, because I split the transcript into 4 parts, the intro, part 1, 2, and 3. And then I just do like a summary, essentially, a summary of each part, and they have to identify the correct order. Yes, James.
I had a question. Earlier you talked about the, Krashen's, or was it Krashen? Maybe not. The Goldilocks,
Yeah.
Comprehension thing. Was there any podcast or particular episode of Indicator that kind of hit the, like, that perfect sweet spot for you?
So, that's a good question. I think sorry, I'm trying to remember those 4. The speakers they interview, those are key. Like sometimes they get a very engaging, a very dynamic speaker, someone that's really interesting to listen to, someone who, explains the topic very effectively. So in those cases, that's great. And I do definitely select topics that, I think they should be able to connect to. Current news stories, of course, everyone is aware of Russia's invasion in Ukraine and inflation, right, resulting pandemic consequences, cause and effect of like supply chain issues, those sorts of things. These are kind of everyday topics. I mean, we're not experts on them, but they're not totally foreign news stories, and besides that, it's not a guarantee like these will be super interesting to them, unfortunately, which is a challenge because, one is about OPEC, about the global oil economy. Some students might not really care about the global oil, and if they don't, then they have 10 minutes a day listening to something that's maybe a little bit boring for them. So that's just, that's an unfortunate challenge, that not everybody's going to be super thrilled about the content. What I was able to do during the pandemic, spring semester 2020 and 2021, we were totally online and we didn't have a curve. And so in that case, I chose, I think I don't know if I chose 5 or 6 options. No, I don't remember, but students could choose from different topics, students from different classes. From one class, they didn't all have to take the same exam. And the reason was because they're not graded on a curve. We did absolute grading, so even if, because the challenge, that's just not possible when we are on a curve. They all come to the classroom and they all have to take the same exam, class by class. But during the pandemic, they did have the choice of, I gave them the choice. You can choose the topic that's most interesting to you for your exam. I don't know if that makes sense. So the curve is, the curve, we per class, and it is, it's something that I think is important. I really carefully select the content, especially in this case. Yeah, I'm encouraging them to listen to something 10 or 20 times, take a few weeks engaging with these materials. So I really hope that it's somewhat interesting to them, you know. And per Krashen's theory, the more interesting, the better, right? The more interested they are, then it's much easier for them to engage with the content, and it will have more impacts on their language acquisition. So great questions, everyone. This is we still have a little more time as well. Or does anybody? I got to do this presentation a few weeks ago in Gwangju, and at that time I heard some really great ideas from a few attendees. So anyone else, do you have anything you've been doing that has worked really well? Any type of money or economics focused content you have used?
I haven't used anything, but have you already gone through these questions that are in the chat? Why would you use economic money-driven content?
Oh, so these are those are essentially connected to like the outline of my presentation, right?
Okay.
So I like explained the theory, like 2 sources of theory, like that are my inspiration, I think.
I'll watch the video after.
Right. Yeah. So you missed. Yeah, I missed some of those details.
Hi, John. Sorry, can
Hi,
I
Reese. Yeah.
quickly jump in? You just asked, have I used something kind of money driven or economics focused recently? And in fact, just this past week, I was using a topic that was trying to scaffold some of the skills that some of my students need for certain standardized tests, especially in this case, the TOEIC speaking exam. And what I was doing is trying to get them using some of that opinion language, expressing their opinion on one of the questions. And so it was a great entry point, which is why I'm very interested in your presentation topic, money, and talking about money. And then they were discussing a prompt that, you know, is money the most important thing in life? And it helps, I think, make it relatable to them when they try and give more personal examples, speaking from personal experience. And that's something that I was trying to focus on as an outcome, right? Is trying to get them to produce some kind of example, not just why, but, you know, kind of show what they mean. And so that money was a good way for them to generate some of that content. So I think that's what I wanted to add is that it can be a great source of those kinds of personal experiences.
Yeah, excellent. So that was TOEIC speaking prep that you were.
In that particular lesson, it was trying to get some of the lower level students to begin to elaborate and add some of that detail, and how to add detail, not just this is why, but also trying to give some evidence to back it up. And I thought trying to relate it to them, engaging them through money, through finance, you know, no matter if it's a freshman who might not necessarily have the most life experience, you know, but it found some way to make it relatable to them to use that money topic.
Definitely.
And then also to have them trying to use language to express their opinions.
Right. Great. Yeah. Thank you, Reese. And yeah, someone else, please let us know what have you found successful? Or what would you be interested in trying?
I think right now in Korea, a lot of college students are interested in investing. And so I think that would be, I think I heard that from the news actually in Korea, and a lot of the college campuses, the investing club
Mhm.
has been a huge thing in
Yeah.
the college campuses. And so I think going over maybe, you know, crypto or investing or even just financial literacy.
Yeah.
I think how to, you know, survive in this time of inflation, maybe go over Warren Buffett.
Okay.
And tying with that, that's something that I would like to do later in the future or maybe
Yeah.
soon, yeah, with my high schoolers. But yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that for sure from students. Yeah, that example that I shared, it's kind of silly. I say like there's a university alumnus who's doing a prize, a super rich alumnus, and you won $10,000. You have 1 week to spend it. What are you going to do? And then a lot of them say investing. And I say you can break it up into percentages. Like I give them a few like suggestions, and some say 100% investing, 50%. Like that's usually a hot response, a popular response for them. Yeah. We have a few more minutes, 5 or 7 minutes left.
So is that something about their risk, understanding risk? You know, investing to those kinds of, you know, 100%, that kind of thinking.
Oh, is that for Nehemiah or for me, Greg?
It doesn't matter. I'm just
Yeah.
responding to that comment.
Okay. So for me, I'm curious. I want them to think about analyzing what money means to them. I'm just curious in that that sort of self-reflection, like how do they spend money and why do they spend money, and like how do they use their financial resources? And so thinking about the future, yeah, I'm not really sure. It'd be curious to ask students more. Like I do often hear them say, I'm studying the stock exchange. I invest my money now a little bit, but I don't always ask them why. Like I'm sure they want to make more money, you know, but yeah, it would be nice to have a conversation with them. Does that make sense, Greg?
Oh, sure. I'm curious about the is there something there about understanding risk?
Okay, I see. Yeah, interesting.
I've done very similar to what you've just said, Greg. Actually, with another class, a different thing I was trying to teach them the language, vocabulary, expressions surrounding risk, and then I brought in like cryptocurrency, and then also some topics that I thought, you know, relating to billionaires that are very prominently, very much talked about amongst, you know, college freshmen, especially like Elon Musk and so on. And they seem to really find that interesting, but also it helps teach them a little bit about the concept of risk as well, I think. Not just the language. I felt like it was introducing them to that idea, you know, Elon Musk buying Twitter, you know, the risks surrounding that, and crypto.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I want to work on that approach for sure.
Connected with the critical thinking, I suppose, as well.
Right. Yeah, I think so. And any other comments or questions?
I just have a general comment. So I know your work is focused on money, but I really it was really interesting for me to see how you're using podcasts. One of the courses I'm teaching is media English, so I'm looking at different types of media and how that can be used to study self-study English. And I'm doing podcasts at the moment. So this approach, like of the repeated listening, and also combining that with the midterm, it has been really interesting for me, as well as the topic itself. But also students are really interested in money and investing, and it's not so much the risk they focus on, but having it as a future safety net, because they really consider the compound interest, and it, as for some of them are looking to make a quick buck, you know, but for others, they're looking for you know, long-term investments, 10, 15, 20 years down the line. How much could that $10,000 be if I invest it now?
Yeah, I mean, no, it is, in my understanding, I think college students are very concerned about their employment situation and their opportunities, challenges they'll be facing in 5 years. You know, it's a tough topic too. It can be, I think. But yeah, Kirsten, so I yeah, more recently, especially this semester, quite a bit. Yeah, really focusing in on the financial theme. But yeah, I've used a lot of different types of topics before with podcasts. And so yeah, like James was asking about before, it's I think it's great if you can present students with a few options, because if you do, like me, if you have to select only one, then that's yeah, usually not as easy to please. If students can choose from A, B, C, or D options, they will likely be happier with it.
They'll find something that at least, oh well, it's better than the other options, so they'll feel
Yeah,
like more
right.
comfortable with it. They'll find
Yeah, it could be like a psychological effect.
Yeah, but
yeah, at least I didn't have to do that one. Yeah,
it's good that to give them options. I agree with that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something briefly. Sometimes I worry and I think about, as I prepare, using some kind of listening, like a podcast, about the leveling. Of course, that's always a consideration. And so I just wanted to give some suggestions to everyone here. If you want to find something that's maybe more level appropriate for lower level students, there are some great podcasts that are specifically targeted at English language learners, like BBC News Learning English. Also, there's some shorter ones, 6-minute English. It's focused on like bite-sized podcasts, but also focused on particular vocabulary, and they kind of reinforce the vocabulary and they explain to the learners. So that's
I'm using that one at the moment. 6-minute English. It's great. Because they reiterate the phrases that have come up during the interviews, and then they re-explain them again. Yeah. And I don't know, you probably all know this, but I found that if I just open the Google Docs, you can do text to speech, and it's not perfect, but you can record anything and then you can tidy it up later, rather than, I'm such a slow typer. So that's how I can make my own transcript if I need to.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I definitely would, in almost all cases, only choose material that has a transcript, just because it's got to be quite short for it to be useful if there's no script involved. This site I just posted, sometimes I use it maybe once a month or so, a few times a semester. And this is only one speaker. So I prefer NPR because usually there are multiple speakers. It's more of a conversation. Breaking News English is really useful because it's free, and there's a huge amount of resources. There are thousands of posts. So I really recommend. And it's something I share with students and say, yeah, you should go here in your free time if you want to get some English news, do some self-study. You should try this one. And that one, yeah, it does. But the weak point, I guess, would be it's one speaker, right? But they take the same story, and they have like 3 or 4 different difficulty levels for the same story, like just like simpler sentences, simpler lower level vocabulary, or moving up. And they're posted like a couple times a week. So great. And yeah, I think it's close to the end of the time slot. And Kirsten or anyone, do you know, or Reese, anybody, do you know if something is happening at 5? Are there still other presentations?
There might be some. I'll have
Okay.
a quick look now. I think it does
Okay.
go until 6.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
So
And
who is in this room?
I think my room is gonna, this is the end of my Zoom room, this one. But yeah, I'm happy all of you attended today. Thank you so much for your questions and your comments and for joining. And
Thank you for sharing your materials.
oh yes, you're welcome. So I don't know if I put a slide with my email at the end. I don't know if I showed you. Here it is. Sorry, I'm typing slow. Okay, there it is. jbreckenfeld.hofs@gmail. Yeah, just let me know if you have any other questions. I'll try my best to answer. And I would, I'm willing to share any materials too, if that would be helpful for you. And another thing too, the stuff that I showed you, I'll put those up onto a Discord in just a few minutes as well. So, all right, I'm gonna stop the recorder.